All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our study of absolute values. We're actually going to be looking at the absolute value function and mainly looking at how to graph the absolute value function. So what is an absolute value? What's the absolute value function? It's a function that looks like this. It has the f of x, meaning a function. We can also remember that f of x is the same thing as y, so we can always replace it if necessary. Inside the absolute value is a linear equation, mx plus b, and on the outside we have a value, just a number. We can have a number. That doesn't have to be there, but it can. You'll see as we get to the examples. We have to understand that m cannot be 0 in this equation, because if m was 0, all we'd have was a simple number, and it would no longer be a absolute value function. It would just be a number itself. We are going to make a note that just as we had in linear equations, that m, we use the letter m for a very specific reason, because that's the slope. And what I mean by this one side and other side statement here is across the vertex, and we'll mention that again as we get going. So we're going to note that m is the slope. And what we're going to make a note of is that one side is the m value and the other side of the vertex is the opposite of m. So if m was 3, we would have both a slope of 3 and negative 3 on the graph itself. So let's take a look at what the graphs look like. And you might remember the shape of these graphs from previous math classes. And the graphs, if I just set up a set of axes here, the graph is a V-shape graph. This would be an absolute value function. If you want to make a note here, one side of this line has a slope of m, and the other side has a slope of the opposite of m. Oops, not 3. The opposite of m. So one could have a positive slope on one side and a negative slope on the other side. But the slopes are the same. The absolute value of the slopes are the same. We could also have, if I was to reverse some of this stuff here, we could also have an absolute value function that looks like this. Again, you need to make a note that the slope on the left and the right are the same slopes, just one is positive and one is negative. And that's going to come in handy when we decide to start graphing these later on in this video. All right, so we can have upside down V shapes. We can have right side up V shapes. We cannot do sideways because that's no longer a function. But these two that I just graphed for you are just random examples of what the absolute value function looks like. So if we want to look at a few things on how to graph, little things on what we need in order to graph. The vertex, let's put that graph back up here, or a graph back up here anyway. Vertex essentially just means corner. That point right there is the vertex. So that's the vertex of my absolute value function. And we can find the vertex by doing the opposite of b over m. So we find the value of b divided by m and make it the opposite of what that value is. And again, you'll see what that means in a few minutes. And then the y value is the c value that's on the outside. Now, I graphed one like this, but if you need this here, if you put a negative sign in front of the absolute value, make some axes here. the absolute value of x looks like this. It's a V shape that opens up because it's a positive. If we put a negative in front of the absolute value, that is how we get the upside down V-shaped graph, or upside down absolute value graph. Okay, so this is kind of the notes section, the really important little pieces. If we were to go forward and to look at how to graph, if you follow these steps, you should be able to graph every absolute value problem that I ask you to graph. We're going to look specifically at this equation here, this function, f of x is equal to the absolute value of x minus 2 plus 3. So what I want to do first is I want to think about the values. Oops. I know that b is negative 2. I know that c is equal to 3. And I know that m is equal to 1. It's the number in front of the x here. Now, when we go to graph, what we need to do first is find the vertex of the absolute value. So you recall from the last page here that the vertex is the opposite of b over m, comma, c. So in our case, we're going to say the opposite of b over m, oops, sorry, m is 1 in this case, comma, c, which is 3. And then we're going to simplify this to make it a little bit easier looking numbers here. The opposite of negative 2 over 1 is just positive 2, comma, 3. So there's the vertex of our absolute value. After you find the vertex, you're going to obviously graph the vertex. What we want to do is determine the slope, which we did already. And we're going to say on each side, now this is a positive vertex, or sorry, a positive absolute value, which means it's going to go like this. So we know it's going to be an right side up V. And on the right-hand side, it's going to be positive slope. So on the right, it is m equals 1. And on the left, m is going to equal negative 1. It's going to be our negative slope on the left-hand side. We're going to use that to go from the vertex and draw our new graph. So we're going to go to the point 2, comma 3. And we're going to plot that point right there at 2, comma 3. That is the vertex. And in order to create the rest of the line, we're going to use the slope on both sides. So if I go a slope of 1, I'm going to go right 1, up 1, or up 1, right 1, and up 1, right 1. And I'm going to create those dots like that. And on the left side, we know that the slope is negative 1 over 1. Now, normally we would go down 1, right 1, but we can't go that direction. We need to go in the opposite direction. So we need to go left 1, up 1, and left 1, up 1. So you need to remember that both sides should be the same kind of slope here. And then what you're going to do is you're going to connect the dots, obviously, with a straight line because these are linear functions on both sides. So use your straight edge. And there we have the graph of this function f of x. So I have 2 examples for us, 2 more examples that we're going to look at. The first one being 2x minus 3. And so first I'm going to find the vertex. It is the opposite of b, which is -3, over m, comma, 0 in this case because there is no plus c. This is like saying plus 0 out here. Negative, negative means this is positive 3/2, comma, 0. And my m is 2. Now this is a positive absolute value, so it opens up. So on the right side, my slope is 2, and on the left side, my slope is -2. So we're going to go to the point 3/2, comma, 0. So I need to find some numbers here. Let's go. That's 1, that's 2, 3, and 4. And there's 1 and 2. Let's just go up to 2. Now 3/2 is the same thing as 1.5. So we're going to go to 1.5, comma, 0. And we need a slope of 2. So we're going to go up 2 and right 2. So notice we're going to be halfway between when we go by ones, right? 1 goes there and 2 goes there. But we're just going to go up 2 and right 1. And up 2, right 1. And we're going to connect those dots with straight lines. And there we have our absolute value graph. All right, last one here. Same idea, only in this case, notice I gave us a negative absolute value and I gave us a fraction to deal with. So for our vertex, it's the opposite of b over a, comma, c. The negatives cancel here. Negative times negative is positive. 2 divided by 1/2 is really the same thing as 2 times 2. So this becomes 4, comma, 1. So we can come out here to the point x equals 4. Now we can go up to y equals 1. Oops, let's use red on that one. Remember the point 4, 1. And then what we have to remember is that because it's a negative, instead of going upwards, we're going to go downwards. Now the slope here is 1/2. So on one side, it's going to be positive 1/2, and on the other side, it's going to be negative 1/2. Right? So the slope of 1/2 means, for negative, means down 1, right 2, and then down 1, right 2. And on the other side, we need to go down 1, left 2, and then down 1, left 2 again. But I really only need these points specifically to draw my linear pieces. And there we have the absolute value function f of x here. All right, that's going to finish us off for this video. Again, I hope you learned a little bit, and I will see you guys tomorrow.